motivational speaker Simon Sinek was giving a talk about great leadership, and he was quoted saying the following: "The quality of a good leader cannot be judged through their answers, but rather through their questions." And I think the point is obvious. The best way that I can affect others to help them do what's best for them is to allow them to think about what it is that they need to be doing, and not for me to just spoon feed all of the answers and the information for them. But I think this quote, as important as it is to affect change on others, is just as important for me to affect change on myself. Boys, we live in a very chaotic world. Tragedy can strike at any moment. Somebody can do something to me that I don't feel is fair. Maybe it's a parent, it's a teacher, it's a friend. And in these moments, what do human beings do? We search for answers. We need to know why things are happening, because we feel like there's something we can do about it. And while we use a number of different ways to figure out these answers, I want to highlight two of them and discuss their flaws and their weaknesses. Number one, we use our intellect. So I may be in a situation where mom puts food on the dinner table and none of these options are to my liking. I'm sure this is familiar to most of us in this room. And so based on my intellect, based on what I know, I can draw the logical conclusion: mom doesn't like me. Has to be. Must be. Based on what I know, if she liked me, she would have put something that I liked on the dinner table. She didn't do that. She doesn't like me. Very simple, very clean. The second thing we use is our previous experiences. And so maybe a friend of mine calls me up and says, "Hey coach, you want to come hang out?" And I reflect back to a time where I hung out with this person, and I say to myself, the last time I did it, it didn't work out well. So therefore I can logically conclude the same will happen again. But when I think about these mechanisms of obtaining information and allowing me to use these things to make decisions for myself, I recognize their flaws and their weaknesses. In the first scenario, using my intellect. What if mom actually went to the supermarket and she tried to obtain the foods that I genuinely enjoy? They weren't available. Imagine had I known that before I drew my first conclusion, would I draw the same the second time around? And imagine scenario number two, using previous experiences. What if the next time I hang out with the same friend, it's a different experience? We come along a commonality that we have between the two of us, and that item promotes and engages a beautiful relationship that I never knew was even possible. Would I draw the same conclusion that it wasn't worth my while to hang out with that same individual? So boys, we have a problem. The mechanisms in which we use to obtain information and to make critical decisions in our lives are flawed. So what do we do? How do we make change? How can we use something else that maybe we're not using to make better decisions for ourselves? Super Bowl winner, Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner had a very interesting journey to stardom. His first 4 years in college, unlike any other Hall of Famer, was spent riding the bench. He never started a single game in his college career. Came time for the NFL draft, he went undrafted. He was picked up by the Green Bay Packers as an undrafted free agent, only to be cut by the team not so long later. Now, most people know that the next step in the journey was a career in the Arena Football League, where he would reinvent himself and he would regain the tools to become an NFL quarterback, winning Super Bowls with the St. Louis Rams and with the Arizona Cardinals. But many people do not know what happened in between being cut by the Packers and moving into the Arena Football League. Kurt Warner took a job. You know what his job was? He worked the late shift bagging groceries in a local grocery chain. This man with all of this potential, he has the tools to become a future Hall of Famer, a Super Bowl winner. And this is what he's doing. He's spending his time bagging groceries at 3 o'clock in the morning. How does this make sense? How do we get Kurt Warner to move from bagging groceries at 3 a.m. to throwing Super Bowl winning touchdown passes, making his way into the Hall of Fame? World-renowned author Stephen Covey has a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in this book, he illustrates one mechanism that I would like for us to examine to see if this is something that we can do for ourselves. He gives everybody the opportunity to do the following scenario that I would like us to do together. He said, I want you to imagine a hypothetical situation where you are visiting your own funeral. What are the speakers at this funeral going to be saying about you? What is it that you would like to be remembered by? What are the values that you will leave behind as your legacy? Because boys, what Stephen is saying is as follows. Our intellect might be limited because there's things that we just can't know. Our experiences are limited because we maybe haven't been through them before. But something that's timeless, something that will never change, is my ability to use values that I know will never leave. So I may choose to be kind, respectful, empathetic. Using these values will ultimately get me to where I need to go. And I believe that's how Kurt Warner got from bagging groceries at 3 a.m. to making the NFL Hall of Fame. Because if you ever listen to this man talk on the NFL Network, he's one of the kindest individuals in the room. He has nothing bad to say about anybody. Not even by accident will he say something that's not okay. He's a man driven by values, and he's a man who's on a mission to use these values to make the best decisions for him. So boys, we have choices. Every day you will be presented with an opportunity to make a decision. And the question is, we'll refer back to Simon Sinek, what will you do? Will you think you know every answer because that's the way humans are created to think? And we'll use our limited intellect and we'll use our previous experiences that maybe can't give us all of the tools that we need? Or will you ask yourself the question, what is it that I'm missing? What is it that I don't know that's not allowing me to get to the right answer? And so will I choose to use limited intellect? Or will I say to myself, regardless of the situation, I will rely on my values because they are timeless. And so if the teacher tells me to do something, even if I can't understand why he's asking me to do it, I'm going to do it because it's the respectful thing to do. If a friend of mine calls me to hang out, even if I feel like there's nothing good that can come from this moment, I will rely on my kindness and I'll say, sure, thank you for the invitation. Because if I live my life based on what I know, I can only grow up until what I can think of in my head. But if I rely on my values, it opens my world to things that I never dreamed were possible. It opens myself up to something that I couldn't have thought of on my own. So the question is very simple. What will you like to choose? It's yours for the choosing. It's up to you. Choose wisely.